Hi, everyone. This is Leah Hinds with the Charleston Library Conference. Unfortunately, audio only. I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty today, but I'm really glad everyone's here. We are joined by Stephanie Kaelin and Don Gallagher from Cambridge University Press, whose smiling faces you are able to see, thank goodness. And they are here to talk about all there is to know about evidence-based acquisitions. So thank you all for joining us today. Our webinar is going to get started shortly. It will be in listen-only mode, so attendees will not be able to speak. We won't be able to hear you, but we do have a live chat provided for you. So take a few minutes to test out the attendee chat and just give us your, we can see who's in the room with us. If you do have a question, you can do private to presenter in the chat and send a message only to us as hosts. Hi, everybody. Testing. Hello. For questions about the webinar content or topical questions, you can use the green question mark icon at the top of your screen. And we're going to do Q&A at the end of the presentation, so we'll try to hold questions until then. If you're using your computer audio and have trouble hearing, you can press, there's a little bit of background noise there, use the phone icon at the top of your screen. And the session is being recorded. It'll be available on the conference website within 2 to 3 business days. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Don and Stephanie to get started with their presentation. I'll still be here to answer questions through the attendee chat in the background. So thanks a lot.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our webinar, All There Is to Know About Evidence-Based Acquisitions. We should probably address this up front, that the title of this session is a little highfalutin. We probably should have named it Things That We've Learned About Evidence-Based Acquisition, because that's sort of what we're going to be talking about today, sort of where we've been and what we've learned about EBA in the last 4 years that that Cambridge has been doing the model. We also want to encourage everybody to participate via the chat. We're going to be asking some poll questions throughout, and then at the end we'll all have an opportunity to hear your questions and your comments. And we definitely want to share them with everybody and get to as many as we can. So I'm just going to pass it over to Don, and he'll start.
Thanks, Stephanie. Leah, thank you for organizing this, and thank you to everyone for attending. Either good afternoon or good morning for those of you on the West Coast. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on EBA Cambridge, and then Steph is going to get into some of the details. We're going to actually start right off with our first poll question, and that is, and Leah's going to post that as well, but do you currently have, or have you ever had, an EBA at your library? And you can see the possible responses on the screen. So far, we're either getting yes or no. We're not getting any yes previously. So that's an interesting statistic so far. Okay, I guess we're going to go ahead and share the results for the attendees. And hopefully you can all see that.
Yeah, we're just going to move on. So it looks like we're at about 55% of people said yes, they currently have an EBA, and about 45% of folks said no, they've never. So that's interesting. Yeah,
it gives us some good background as we move forward with the presentation. I'm going to start off with a little bit of basic information on what an EBA is. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because most of you probably do know, but what the steps here with Cambridge University Press, you'll make an initial deposit, which is agreed upon, of course, beforehand with the participating library in Cambridge University Press. We'll then turn on access to a group of titles also discussed and agreed upon, so that you'll have access to those. During the course of the EBA, we can provide periodic usage information to you, either quarterly, monthly, basically whenever you'd like. You can also pull usage information yourself. However, it's probably easier if you already have ebook content from Cambridge to have us do it, because we can weed out what you've already purchased and just get the usage statistics for the titles that are in your EBA. After the EBA concludes, you do make your selection process, which titles you'd like to purchase, and then subsequently those titles, the access to those titles are turned on in perpetuity. You then own those titles. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on EBA at Cambridge University Press. And the first EBA was launched out of our UK home office in 2013. And since that time, we've refined it over the years, principally based on feedback we've gotten from librarians that were participating in the EBAs. And what we've found so far is that EBA is developing into the primary ebook acquisition model in Europe. They've had a little bit of a head start, but that seems to be trending over there right now. And here in the Americas, we also have a growing portion of our overall direct digital ebook sales coming from EBA. And just in the past year, our EBA sales have doubled in terms of the number of participating institutions. And I will note that the Americas does actually also include Canada, so not to let out any of you Canadians who are participating in the webinar today. And getting into a little more detail on that, who currently has EBA, and we have completed over 150 EBAs worldwide since the first one was launched in 2013, and there are now currently worldwide, other than the Americas and Canada, 120 active EBAs, and these are in Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Australia, just about everywhere. Here in North America, there are currently 36 live EBAs here in the United States and 8 in Canada. And in 2018, we've already seen 22 new EBAs beginning. So you can certainly see it's really picking up steam and becoming a preferred method here as well. And of those 36 in the US and 8 in Canada, the FTEs range from 1,500 to 65,000. So you can see by that spread and everything in between, you can see by that spread that an EBA is not just for large universities. There's an EBA for everybody that is interested in one. Give you a little bit of breakdown on the types of institutions that are utilizing our EBAs. You can see baccalaureate is the highest, quickly followed by doctoral universities and additional, the highest level doctoral universities, and then master's colleges, doctoral moderates, and government agencies. And here's a little map, nice graphic to show you this, how the geographic distribution in the United States of the EBAs are, from a high of 5 in Pennsylvania down to single EBAs in a number of states. And certainly, as you can see, some states that don't have any as of yet. Hopefully, we'll be changing that graphic shortly after today's webinar. And in Canada, you can also see the breakdown by province of the current EBAs. I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie, and she's going to get you into a little more detail on why people choose EBAs.
Sure, but before we do that, we're just going to have another poll. And I think we'll just have Leah put that up. And this is about what your preferred acquisition model is right now. We've got a couple options for you: collection purchase, EBA, PDA, DDA, individual title selection, and then other. And if there's an other, we really would love for you to specify that in the chat so that we can see all of your choices. Oh, looks like Julie mentioned that you do a lot of short-term loan in lieu of purchasing. Victoria says, she says PDA, but we do it mediated from ILL requests. Thanks for clarifying, that does help. We'll give everybody just a few more seconds. And it looks like collection purchasing is the sort of the winner here. 35% of you said that your preferred acquisition model is collection purchasing, with 26% saying individual title selection. 22% of you say PDA and DDA, and then another 14% say EBA. Oh, and Lori says collection purchase plus individual title selection. And then we have it looks like a lot of folks have sort of hybrid, yes, a hybrid environment. Thank you. So we'll move on. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is sort of an opportunity for us to reflect on the last 4 years and share some things that we've learned. And we've learned a lot. So for instance, some of the reasons that we've heard from participating libraries about why they choose an EBA is sort of all over the place. And some of those reasons are to be able to give users access to a critical mass of content, and being able to do that sort of quickly, certainly affordably, but also sort of in an easy, efficient way is important to a lot of libraries. A lot of libraries like EBA because they can align their spend with usage, with a demonstrated need. They like that, like the DDA and PDA models, users get to be involved directly with selection of content. But on the other hand, librarians also like that in EBA, that they're in control of making the final decisions, and that they're making informed decisions based on things like usage, but also based on things like the library's collection development priorities, and not just thresholds. Some libraries really like EBA because it allows them to experiment. They get to find out what users want. They might be able to turn on access to content that they might not otherwise have thought to purchase, and see how it goes. And finally, they like the flexibility to choose however broad or granular they want to get with their access. Some surprises that we've learned in the last 4 years is that sometimes high-use titles are not always associated with either the largest programs or the largest courses. Sometimes they don't have anything to do with the subject areas that you probably would expect. We've also found that titles that would have been chosen via traditional selection don't necessarily get used as much as you would think, and vice versa. So sometimes titles that were never purchased via traditional selection because there hadn't been a need indicated for them get used a lot. We've also found that old assumptions about ebook usage in certain subject areas get debunked. So those old wives' tales about how the humanities and math don't like ebooks sometimes gets turned on its head, and you find that those users are actually using them quite a bit. We also found some surprises about the impact on print purchasing. So a lot of folks pretty much assume that after an EBA that their traditional print purchasing might go down. Some other folks found that their traditional print purchasing might actually increase because they're seeing increased need in certain areas and would like to supplement that with print. There's a lot of issues at play with EBA, and a lot of those issues are sort of in the larger sort of e-acquisition space already. But some of those issues are around workflow and staff time investment. So does EBA have a higher investment of time, because it involves both sort of loading titles month by month and also sort of making individual selections. Some other issues at play are the risk of upfront costs. So while you receive access to a lot of titles, you want to be able to see the return on investment in terms of the usage, and that requires a leap of faith. There's also always a tension between sort of ownership and access and what the value is of each. And that's something that, each library has to make a decision about. So is the broad access valuable? And how valuable is ownership? There's also other issues like questions of sustainability that we've heard. So both for libraries and publishers. So some of our customers have questions about, how sustainable is this model, both for them if they buy into it and for us as well. So there's questions about, whether or not this model will stick around. Is it sustainable for publishers? So based on some of these, oh, here we go. I'm being reminded that we are going to do another poll. Is that where we are, slide 10?
Yes.
So I'm just going to wait for Leah to put up the
third poll question.
And the question is, what is your biggest concern in implementing an EBA? The options are upfront costs, staff time and workflow, budget and sustainability, and we also have an option for other that you can also add into the chat so that everybody can see your answer. Okay, so we've already got our first other, tracking custom collections in the knowledge base. That's a big one. We do understand that one is a concern. It looks like so far and away, the biggest concern is budget and sustainability, followed by staff time and workflow, upfront costs, and other are also in there. Oh, we have one more other option, duplication with existing print. Yeah, that's one we've heard too. So based on all of the feedback that we've gotten over the last 4 years, we have, we're sort of launching a new approach to EBA. So some of that includes tiered pricing to make sure that the price fits the customer, that it's the fairest price possible. But we're also focusing on things like the broadest access possible and customer return on investment. We know that one size doesn't fit all and that being flexible is key. So we do want to make sure that there are options at lots of price points. There are subject and custom options available to customers if they have a very particular need, especially in smaller FTE customers and government agencies tend to have very particular needs. But a lot of this new approach really is about providing as broad access as possible and driving use as much as possible because it's in both of our best interests that happens. We're also focusing on providing, lots of opportunities via consortia to make sure that that we can really maximize pricing. And the biggest thing that we've learned over the last 4 years that comprehensive support throughout the EBA program is really necessary. So right now, our EBA support plan includes the following. So we maintain stable collections in the EBA, so we don't have a lot of titles sort of dropping in and out. We provide accurate title lists and our in-house cataloger enhanced mark records on a monthly basis. So we actually hand deliver those on a monthly basis. We do provide coordination with discovery services to make sure that our metadata is getting to your discovery service so that you can turn on these collections in your knowledge base. We also provide, I think Don had mentioned this before, that we do provide enriched usage reporting to really facilitate the selection process and make sure that you're getting all of the information that you need above and beyond a counter report. And finally, we also can provide things like infographics and promotional support either during the EBA in order to sort of get the word out about resources that are available at your library, or provide sort of the infographics after the fact to provide to your library administration to show how effective and successful the program has been. So we just wanted to take a quick look into an existing consortial EBA, just to give you a sense of what we think the benefits are, and what we found to be how the program is the most successful. So this is a particular consortia of 15 participants of sort of small FTE institutions. Their members range from about 1,500 FTE to 6,300. The combined FTE across all of the participating members is less than 40,000. So we're talking fairly small schools. They currently have access to over 650 times their initial deposit commitment per member. And they're on a 12-month EBA at the moment. So to date, they've had 95,000 uses through September. So that's 9 months. So 3/4 of the program has completed. And they've used about, in terms of numbers of titles used, they've used about 16 times their initial commitment. So here's just a quick look at this consortium's usage. Most of these smaller schools were not sort of purchasing a lot of ebooks directly from us before the EBA program. And then really once it began in January, usage has just skyrocketed. And you can see sort of that there's sort of a natural ebb and flow based on the academic calendar. So in the summer it sort of dipped. And then now that the fall semester is getting going, we're seeing it rise up again. What I think is also interesting is that this particular consortium has a very wide, yes, this is usage of our books. And so what I also found interesting was that they have a very wide range of access to lots of content, including both front list and a very deep backlist. And so I wanted to look at how they were using books by the age of the content. And I was really happy to find that they were not only heavily using frontlist, which we would expect. The newest content gets used heavily, but also that they're really using throughout the deep backlist as well. And it really, I think that goes to show that, that some of these older titles are really, these year ranges approximately equal in number to titles included in each group. You know what? I actually did not include that slide, and I should have. I thought that, I might have been the only one interested in it. But actually, I can send it to you afterwards. I think that, as you would expect, we've digitized a lot of our backlist, so the pre-2000 content is rather high. What's the subject areas for this content? This is across all subjects. Is frontlist inclusion a new element in your EBA program? I can't remember.
It's not. It just depends on how you structure the EBA when you set it up. Some elect not to have the newer content, but certainly anyone that wants it, we do include it in all the EBAs. Yeah,
it's not brand new, but I think that that we realize that frontlist inclusion is really important to usage and to an EBA. Another question from Melissa, especially interested in whether the 2015 to 18 and 10 to 14 are about the same size, or if 10 to 14 is a much larger set of books. I will find out for you. I think 10 to 14 and 15 to 18 are pretty similar, although 15 to 18 is 3 years, obviously, and 10 to 14 is 5, right?
But the titles per year should be roughly about the same, give or take, certainly. Well, Scott's question, I guess it would depend on how you define deep backlist.
Yeah, it's not, you know what, I should have included that slide because that graph, because it would have been helpful to explain here. It's not 80% of the list is not backlist, but there is a significant portion.
And that's something that we can send on to Leah to include maybe as an addendum to the presentation or something like that.
Clearly, it was very interesting. You've got lots of.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, for sure. Let me move on to the next slide. Great, perfect. Leah says we can include extra slides or info with the recording. So we'll get you all the information that you want. I'm so glad you guys are so data focused. This is another quick, just a quick look at some analysis that I did that I think shows why we think that EBA is valuable, not only to us, not only to Cambridge University Press, because it's another sort of acquisition model, but that we think it's really good for books. These are a handful of books with sort of an older copyright year that are being heavily used in this particular consortial arrangement. And not only being heavily used at institutions, but they're being pretty broadly used across the consortium. So you can see sort of this top title, The Fragility of Goodness, has been used by has already been used by 7 of the 15 members. This title was published in 2001, and we've only sold 5 copies digitally since it was published online. So, whether or not these, it's possible that some of these members might choose to purchase this title at the end of their EBA, or they might not. Are these chapters? This is a use is a section, so it's a section use, so it would be a chapter. All of our, on Cambridge Core, everything is indexed on the chapter level. Yes. Counter BR2. So anyhow, we really think that that this is good for books, because even if let's say that some of these folks decide to purchase these titles. That's wonderful for these books, right? But it also is fulfilling our mission as a university press to disseminate knowledge. And so that means that that these books that we feel are quality and worthy of use are being used more often and more widely. And that's a win for us.
John, yeah, that is correct. For that particular title, John has asked 5 digital sales in 17 years and 113 uses in 9 months. That is absolutely correct.
Yes. No, we should mention that many of these titles have sold quite heavily in print, right? So
this is electronic only.
This is electronic only, but it sort of goes to show that that even some of these older titles are still relevant, and that this model might be breathing new life into them in terms of from a digital perspective. So some potential next steps or projects that we could be working on once we find a half minute. We have more than 4 years of usage data from large-scale EBAs across Europe, and I'd be really curious to see what kinds of interesting trends or insights we can glean from that, if we can really dig into the data. I think that we could be spending a lot more time engaging with EBA participants to see what else is happening there that might not be immediately apparent from things like usage data. And I think that we're also interested in looking at the impact of EBA on authors and research. As we saw in the earlier slide, that this might have a good impact on authors and on books. But that's sort of it's anecdotal at this point, right? So I think that there's a lot more data work that we could be doing. How do the terms in the European EBA projects differ from North American projects? The terms aren't that different, I don't think. I think that they just got an earlier start in Europe, and a lot more, it's sort of become the preferred acquisition model with a lot of our customers in Europe. Whereas we found that a lot of our customers here are fairly entrenched with their existing acquisition models like collections or title by title purchasing.
And one of the other things too, to the UK in particular, some of you may be familiar with JISC, and the EBAs are offered through that organization to all their members, and so that's something that's a little bit different. We obviously don't have that sort of a national opportunity here in the US, but we do have another question too.
Are we seeing stronger renewal rates? So 2 things. So yes, as Don mentioned, clearly in Europe it's a slightly different situation because of the sort of national consortiums that have clearly a lot of reach, and so those sort of national deals are a little more are prominent. We have a question about, are we seeing stronger renewal rates with EBA models?
The renewal rates are very strong. Stronger. I'm not sure, compared to what, but the renewal rates are very high. Currently, I think that we've only to date had 1 non-renewal in North America and continued expansion, and we do have our initial 2 EBAs in North America are still going into year 5. So that's a little bit of an example to the sustainability, the possibility of sustaining this in terms of content and budget for an institution.
Yeah, I would say that I did look at some of the data for our our sort of European counterparts, their EBAs, and their renewal rates are very strong as well. We have a quick sort of is there a way to compare EBA and DDA to find out which is a better fit for a library? Well, so directly through Cambridge, we only offer EBA. We sort of don't offer the standard meet a threshold, buy a book sort of DDA, PDA. I'm not sure. Let's see. We got more questions. If a use is a session or chapter access, could that have been a user who landed on a page and then navigated it away quickly? In other words, some uses are pure browsing, not necessarily reading, yes or no. So our
again, it's BR2 compliant.
So it's BR2. So our usage is not it's not a session. It would be either a view of the HTML, which requires a click, essentially, to click through to it, or it's a download. And it's entirely, you're right, it's entirely possible that some users might actually download something and not read it. But we have no way of knowing that.
But we are using the BR2 counter compliance standards, so that's sort of what we can do in terms of trying to indicate what's a usage at this point as best we can. And there's one more question.
Another question. Do you know the average price per book for an individual institution involved with the EBA program with CUP? Average price per book.
Well, we do have our standard pricing for our monographs, our course books, our textbooks, and our Cambridge Library collection title. So depending on which one of those, it can range from 140 to 500 for the textbooks. So it's just going to depend. And if you do include the Cambridge Library collection titles, those are $80.
Right. Most of our titles, the ones that most people buy are 140 or $215. That is, so generally with an EBA, at the end of the program, you're purchasing at list price. But if you're talking about the average price per book in terms of usage, so like cost per use with an EBA, we can definitely try to get some of those figures for you, and we can send those over to Leah as well.
And a couple more quick questions. Does the year-to-year deposit vary? Not usually. The way we found them varied is if people want to increase the content they're accessing, like including our partner presses in their EBA. And last question before we move on to the next slide, or look at this next slide in a little bit more detail.
Okay, so we have one more question. So there isn't a minimum amount of time to spend on a page, chapter, book before it's considered a view.
No. I mean, it's the BR2.
I would have to check.
Standard.
Let me check with our platform development team and find out about that for you. Because it was my understanding that we're talking the great majority. Because if you look at the BR2 like. It does break it down between HTML views and PDF views, and the great majority are PDF views. So, which means that it's actually a download. It's not a view. It's not a browse situation. But I can find out if there is sort of a minimum time spent on something that counts as a view. I think that was something that was being considered.
And one last question we'll do before we move on about establish the CUP consortial model, or we still in the experimental pilot EBA model for consortia. Again, it's going to depend on the consortia, the size of the consortia, the number of participants, what kind of content they want to have access to. So it's going to vary. So there's not a one size fits all here, because it's going to be depending on the consortia and what they're interested in.
Right. I mean, when it comes to sort of, we don't really have, as Don says, we don't have a standard consortial model, really. Essentially, we are happy to work with a consortium, or, we have sort of some schools that are in sort of traditional formal consortial arrangements. We have some that are in very informal sort of arrangements, like, me and this school want to get together and try something out. And we're actually really more than happy to try to accommodate that too. And how it works really, as Dawn says, does depend on what you want, how much you want to spend, what kind of access you're looking to provide. And some folks, as we found, have very particular things that they want to do. And some folks want just to provide as much access as possible. And we're really happy to accommodate all of those things. So finally, we have one last slide. We also have one last
question that Leah would be
question.
Happy to put up, and there it is. What do you like most about the EBA model? Wide access, cross-predictability, full control over purchasing decisions, or other? And again, as before, if you want to specify in chat, that would be great.
Oh, Harold says all of the above.
Thanks,
That
Harold.
makes me feel good. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua, also.
Oh,
And
I'm
Kathy.
so glad that these are things that people like. That's great.
Well, yeah, Nicole and Dee, there are differences between PDA and DDA.
Right. So Nicole has commented that she says, I feel like you don't have full control if having to pay up front versus DDA, PDA, which you don't have to pay for until triggered. And she asks if she's missing something. And I think that yeah, I mean, as we mentioned before, sort of there is a tension here. There is a certain amount of a leap of faith, essentially.
But I think also when we say full control, we mean of which titles you ultimately select to purchase. So that was what we were intimating when we said full control. Everything is DRM free. Scott had asked, I think that was either, I wasn't sure if that was a question or a statement, but it is true.
Yes. So as Julie just mentioned, with EBA, you can take longer to make decisions on what to buy as opposed to DDA. We also like to think that that rather than setting up a trigger or a threshold, that it makes sense to give the control back to librarians, to really make the decision about how they want to build their collections.
Long term.
Yeah. Melissa mentions, I prefer DDA, but EBA is much better than firm or collection purchases for publishers who don't participate in DDA. And I think that is a growing issue. I'm not sure that we participate in many DDAs anymore.
We're probably participating in less, and also a full 50% plus of our content is only available on the Cambridge platform. It's not available through third-party aggregators.
Half our content is exclusive to our platform. Julie mentioned sometimes users would trigger a 3-time purchase when a book was assigned an error, for example. This would not be a problem with EBA. That is true.
We missed one.
So essentially, with an EBA, and this is one of the things we like, is that a user could use a book as much as they want, and you might decide that's not for us. It's great that that person had access to this book that they wanted or that they needed, but we don't need that in our library in perpetuity, and that would be your choice. We have one question. One comment, an ideal EBA program is not having to pull records from our catalog at the end of the trial. That's difficult for our tech services staff. Yes, we understand that. And what we've done to sort of help with that is to provide sort of a mark file of all the titles that you would need to pull so that you don't have to identify them yourself. But if you have any other suggestions for how we could better deal with that, we certainly would be happy to discuss it.
And sorry, Steph, go ahead.
Yeah, so it looks like full control over purchasing decisions wins the day with 65% of your votes, followed by wide access with 21% of your votes. Harold has a comment. Have you modeled what a DDA version of your EBA projects would cost if 4, 5, or 6 or whatever uses would have triggered a purchase? Yes, we often do flag those for customers when we send them usage reports, their enriched usage reports when they're making decisions. Because often folks do want to see, sort of the titles with the most use anyway.
And we've also done some interesting information on titles the value of titles that were used but not purchased as part of the EBA, and it can be quite substantial. And also, it's some of the more established EBAs that have been utilizing. People are purchasing titles, with above 10 uses and more, and not even selecting titles that might have between. Have some that have up to 16 uses and they're not being purchased immediately. They're looking at some of those titles to purchase with additional funds. But just pointing to the fact that it's not often difficult for people to find titles based on usage anyway that they want to add to their collection, because the usage is consistently very high across the board.
Oh, Sandy, I just turned off the poll, so now you're probably seeing our
questions for discussion.
The other thing that we found too is that folks who continue with the EBA as well have a little more time year on year to make decisions. So let's say a book got some use last year, but it might not be sort of your first choice in terms of perpetual access purchasing. Maybe it doesn't fit your programs. Maybe, it wouldn't otherwise be part of your sort of overall collection development plan. If you see some of the folks we have noticed, sort of if they see continued use year on year, then they're able to sort of make a decision about whether or not that title is valuable in perpetuity or not. And if it's not, then at least they had the access that clearly was important to somebody. So we've got some questions for discussion to wrap up here. And we're just gonna sort of read them off and then sort of open the floor. I know that it's a little awkward with the typing, but you guys can then send us lots of questions and we can talk about some of these issues. So we want to know sort of what might be some of the other unintended advantages or, on the other hand, negative consequences from EBA that we haven't touched upon here. What other concerns do you have about EBA or other emerging models? And if you have participated in EBA, what did you find surprising? Did you find any noteworthy trends or patterns that you'd like to share? Okay, here we go. We got some questions already. Melissa says, I would like to have more time to evaluate the usage data before we're forced to spend out the previous year's deposit. If the window fall on people's vacation time, it's a real problem to do that. Why would CUP care how long we take to choose, especially if we renew anyway?
Well, again, I mean, it's not down to the day and the minute, that we have you make these decisions. If there's vacation time interfering with the established calendar, we're certainly going to give you some additional time until everybody's back and has a chance to look at the data. But part of the reason for ultimately, even if you are renewing in terms of choosing titles, is because the royalties need to be applied to the authors, and that's some of that's based on the sales, so that needs to come into play too. We do have a responsibility to our authors as well, so that's one of the reasons. But as I said, we're not down to the hour and the minute. We certainly have flexibility for you in that regard, to have some additional time to make decisions if you're like, gee, people aren't here and we haven't had a chance to do it.
Yeah, we understand that it can be time consuming, and that if you have a process by which you like to include a lot of selectors, that it can be a little, so you might need more than a month. And I think that everybody understands that there should be flexibility there. That said, finance department does not love it when we have money just sitting around that's not applied to books. So, okay, after a certain number of views, do you lose access to the title? No, that is one of the benefits here, is that regardless of whether or not you choose to purchase a title, that title, you would keep access to it. regardless of how many uses. So there's no threshold for purchase. Purchases are made entirely on your own with your
if you decide for whatever reason you want to purchase 50 titles that have no uses and not purchase 50 titles that had 20 or more uses, that's completely up to you. Again, you make the final decision. Obviously, that's not likely to happen. That's an extreme example. But again, you don't lose access to that title. You're not going to lose access to it. And you're not required to purchase any specific title regardless of the numbers of use. Another one.
Does anybody have any comments on any of the discussion questions?
Or any other questions
or
at
any
all?
Other
We're happy
questions
to entertain.
Can your EBA customers specify how much deep backfile they want, as in only books from a certain pub date forward? Yes. You can, and certainly folks do. And we do have various options in terms of sort of set collections that offer various levels of backfile or front file. And so there's lots of customization there. You can really just choose what it is that you think that you need. John has asked, is the number of available titles based on deposit for the year? So there isn't an exact formula.
It's related certainly, but again, as we mentioned earlier, what we're looking to do is provide a wide range of options for a wide range of library types and library budgets. So hoping to create EBAs that are appropriate for everybody. I mean, sometimes it might be a subject area EBA if that's going to suit your budget needs and what your research needs are. So there's not a specific formula. It is related to a degree, but not.
Mm-hmm. But I will say that generally, yes, there is a relationship between deposit and access. So more deposit, more access generally would be right. Does your backfile overlap at all with subscription ebook platforms like ProQuest, eBook Central? Oh, and then what are the variables? So two things. There's a couple of variables that we look at, and some most generally would be Carnegie classification, and then to help figure out sort of what the sort of overall potential need or what the potential usage of the content would be in the first place. And then we're going to go back to Debbie's question. Does your backfile overlap at all with subscription ebook platforms like ProQuest? So yes, as Dawn mentioned, about 45% of our content is available through third-party aggregators. The other 55% is not. If you're interested in an EBA and you don't want to duplicate, we'd be more than happy to dedupe and provide a collection that is only sort of non-aggregator content, if that's helpful to you.
And also, likewise, if you do have a larger an EBA with access to a larger collection, but you want to make sure that you're not purchasing any titles that are available through a subscriction content, you can send us a list of those Cambridge titles that are available, and we'll make sure that we don't complete that. That wouldn't be part of your purchase of an EBA.
Joshua says, I have found a little difficulty with the BR2 usage reports, since one item may have 10 chapters, while another has 30, makes it difficult to adequately evaluate quality of individual usage with the shifting context. Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, that's... John,
Counter 5, yeah.
Stay tuned for Counter 5. Well, I think we'll all be interested in seeing that. And I think that clearly is an interesting problem, right? Where's his thumbs up emoticon?
How do we do it? I don't know.
I have no idea. We have the little guy. Can we do it? Oh, I don't know. I'm not even going to try. I'm not good at technology. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. There he is. You found it. You found him. Oh, you got a peace sign too.
Oh, whoops. Okay.
Wow, that's fancy. Just send it. No, you send it to everybody.
Okay.
There. Oh my God.
Lots of thumbs up there now. Too.
Right. Awesome. Do we have any other questions?
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate your participation. As Devin said, we are going to add some of that additional content that you had inquired about in terms of the numbers to the materials that Leah will have available to everybody, as an addendum or in addition to the presentation. And,
right. I just realized we also don't have our contact information here.
I don't remember if we have that on page 1. I'm going to go back there and see if it's there. I apologize for the. No, we don't. Sorry.
We'll add that there too. So if you do want to chat with us further, we'd be happy to do that. And yeah, so thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We had a lot of fun. We appreciate
your time. And all the great questions and the interest. And as I said, we'll get that information over to Leah with some additional content, as well as the way to contact us. Sorry about that. And have a great afternoon, everyone. It must be afternoon for everyone by now, or just about.
Hi, everybody. This is Leah again. I just wanted to jump in here at the closing and say thank you. Thanks to all of you for attending and for asking so many great questions. I mean, this was a hugely engaged audience, and I really love seeing that. Thanks to Cambridge for sponsoring the webcast. Thanks to Stephanie and Dawn for presenting and fielding all the questions. The video, all the slides, contact information, all of that will be available on the Charleston Conference website. We'll send you guys an email when that's available. And we'll also have a very short survey to say, feedback on this session, how we did, how we can improve, and suggestions for content and maybe speakers for the future. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.